Hey, hello everyone, how are you doing? Welcome back to the third session of Nightwatch.js series. After an introduction and in the last session where we have learned about setting up installation of Nightwatch.js, today we are going to start with writing test. Let us first check out what are the things we plan to cover in today's session. We will start with BDD, behavior driven development, and how testing fits into that. BDD test got a few syntaxes that we have to understand first. For example, we will understand what is describe, what is it, what is beforeEach, what is afterEach, and possibly a few more. And after understanding each of these things, we will write our first test and run. This entire series brought to you by Lambda Test. Lambda Test is a GenAI native quality engineering platform that empowers team to test intelligently, test smarter, and ship faster. Built for scale, it offers a full stack testing cloud with 10K plus real devices and over 3000 browsers for cross browsers and end-to-end testing. And we are going to see a lot of Lambda test with Nightwatch.js in the upcoming sessions. Now it's time to talk about BDD. What does behavior driven development or the BDD mean? Behavior driven development or BDD is a software development approach which focuses on specifying the behavior of an application from the perspective of the user or your stakeholders before you even write code. In most of the cases, we go about developing the code, writing the feature and the functionality, and then write test for it. But behavior-driven development suggests that you first identify the perspective of the user or the stakeholder who will be using your application, and based on that perspective of the behavior, you start defining your tests. Think of BDD like writing stories about how the app should behave and making those stories pass. And if any of the stories fail, then you alert saying that it is failing and something to fix in your application or the application logic. Now, let us talk about the syntaxes, BDD test syntaxes, because after understanding that, we'll be able to write test in the BDD test syntax format using Nightwatch.js. Let's start with the first one, that is describe. So what is describe? Describe's whole purpose is to group related tests together into a single suite name, right? It is more for organizing things together. You might have multiple tests to run to test different scenarios, but if you want to group them together so that when a reports get generated, it is more readable. You can organize multiple tests logically. For all that purpose, we use describe function. What describe takes? First is the name, the suite name. So we can say e-commerce search. Now I've defined e-commerce search as a test suite, and under this I want to keep multiple tests. How I can keep the test? The first parameter we pass is the suite name, and the second parameter would be another function, and all your related tests go here. Okay, so this is the first syntax. You can also think it like a folder, that contains all the test files, but it is inside your code. Just an analogy. Okay, now the next one. Next one is called it. What it is? This is used for defining an individual test case that will be placing inside the describe. Okay, but let's write it so that we understand like what each of them does. So purpose for this to define an individual test case. Again, how am I going to write it? Each it should have one clear scenario defined and a name that describes the scenario. For example, if I am running multiple tests for e-commerce search, one of my test case could be should show search result for iPhone. When searching is done, it should show the search result for the term iPhone. So I will say should show search results for iPhone. And then I have to write again using a function. So write the steps here to execute this test case. This it ideally be placed inside describe, and like this there can be multiple it which define individual test cases can be defined under one describe. Then the next syntax that I want you to learn is called expect. What this does? This is used for making assertions. In testing, an assertion is a statement that actually verify whether a condition is true or false during the test execution. The whole purpose of its existence to check if the actual outcome of a test matches the expected outcome or not. If the assertion is true, the test continues. If it false, the test fails. And that indicates an error. That's how we define assertion. So expect is another syntax that we have to keep in mind that helps us in writing assertions. One example of it could be expect. Let's say we are expecting some element over here, and that element to have a text equal, let's say, iPhone. Okay, so this looks like a natural English language, right? You expect a particular div to have text that equals iPhone. We may not write this exact syntax when you talk about Nightwatch.js, but understand, like when you talk about BDD, there is something called expect that helps you to make assertions. Then the next one we'll talk about, and that is in some test runners like jest, test and it are identical. Nightwatch.js supports it. This is what we use in Nightwatch.js. You will be seeing that when I'll be using a full-fledged test suite and the test cases inside that. But wherever you need consistency, you probably want to use everything either in it or either in test. So test, you have to remember it like alternative to it. So I can define test just like I have defined it, a particular name of my test case, and then a function. The function can be an anonymous function which does certain testing. Okay, let's not put any focus into this right now. We are going to write test, and that's the time we'll understand this. So this is done. The next one we will bother about is something called before. The whole purpose of before is runs once before all test in the describe block. Okay, so whatever we do inside before, that runs once before all the test in the describe block. So inside describe block, we will have either it or test. We can have multiple it or multiple test. If we have a before, the code inside before will run once before all the test inside the describe block. And why it is required? If that is the use case, this use case is very much suitable and useful for any kind of setup that might be utilized or used by all the tests inside the describe block. So to share something or to put something which is shareable across the test, we can put it inside the before. So let's define it like runs once before all test in describe block. Okay, and inside before you can have a function, and inside this you can write whatever you want to share across the tests. Okay, now naturally, as we spoke about before, here comes after. And again, naturally, as I explained before, you know what after is now. The purpose of the after is to run once after all the tests in the describe block. Okay, just the opposite. And when you will be using after all the tests run, if you have to do certain kind of cleanup, maybe closing some database connections or some file stream, on those cases you will be using after. So what is the purpose? Runs once after all tests in the describe block. And what is the signature? Again, after takes a function, an anonymous function, and here you do whatever after all tests are run. Okay, so this is also done. Now there are two more, beforeEach and then afterEach. These names are very self-explanatory because they almost sound like English language. So beforeEach means runs before every test case inside the describe block. The difference between before and beforeEach is before runs once before all the tests in the describe block execute, but beforeEach runs before every test case inside the describe block. So that's the difference. The syntax is exactly same like what we have seen for before and after. Here you write your beforeEach logic, what you want to run, and when you should be using beforeEach. One of the use case where you can use beforeEach would be maybe you want to reset the application state, or you want to navigate to the start page or a particular page before you run each test cases. So those are the use cases where you will be using beforeEach. Similar to beforeEach, the afterEach would be it runs after every test cases. And the syntax is also same. Function, and inside this function you write the logic what you want to run after every test case. Again, the usage will be just like after. You can write your cleanup logic, or you want to do some logging. You want to put certain things in your application log or console log, wherever it is, or you want to take screenshot after every test case execution is done. You want to take a screenshot. All these things you can put inside afterEach. All right, so as we now know the definition of describe, eat, expect, test, before, after, before each, after each. I think it's time that we utilize either all or most of them to write our first test and then run it. To write the first test, let us create a file inside the test folder. In the last video, we have learned that inside test folder, if we keep the test, that's the default folder. That's what we have told Nightwatch.js configuration, right, for keeping our test. So let's create one ecommerce.test.js. We'll be using this e-commerce playground to test a few things, write few test cases, following all the syntaxes that we have learned so far. So first thing first is the describe. So you should start with describe. And what we learn about describe, that it takes the name of the test suite. So what we'll give as a name, say e-commerce playground test. Now you can give more meaningful name based on what exactly you're testing, what kind of test you are grouping together. Make sure the names are more meaningful because these names are going to appear in your test report. And after this, we will have a function, a callback function. Inside this anonymous callback function, we will start defining other things. So let's first define a before that runs before all test. So runs before all test, and that will be before. Correct, right? Now what before takes? It takes a function, and inside this you can do a bunch of things. What we can do, we can first do a console.log of, say, starting Nightwatch test suite, right? So that should basically start. And here we can also do one more thing. We can initialize the browser object. What does it mean? We are going to open that e-commerce playground on the browser, right? So it is good that before any test run, we initialize the browser. And again, the opposite thing, after every test run, we can kill the browser. So we can call the init method of the browser API from Nightwatch.js to initialize the browser. Now to do that, we have to call browser.init. So this will initialize the browser. Now browser.init, it could be called asynchronously. So for that reason, if you're coming from the JavaScript background, you can use the await keyword before that. If you use the await keyword before that, and if the await keyword is used inside a function, you have to use an async keyword for this function. Okay, now you might be seeing me writing this async and await almost for everything that we'll be defining today, but we have a separate session where we'll be getting more deeper, understanding what is async, what is await, and why we are using async and await so much in terms of defining things in Nightwatch.js. So async and await is mostly for handling the asynchronous operation. We'll be getting much more deeper into that once the time comes in our future sessions. But for now, you take it in this way. Browser.init, if you want to handle this asynchronous call, you have to use await keyword in front of it. And wherever you use await keyword, if that code is inside a function, then you have to use an async keyword before that. That's it. Otherwise, it's a very regular function that we use all the time. All right. Before is done. Now, as before is done, let's do after. And that runs after all the tests. So similarly, we will have after, and here also we'll have a function, and we'll say console.log closing Nightwatch, because this particular stuff will run after all the tests. And here only we can do all the cleanup kind of thing. So what cleanup we will do, we have opened the browser before, we've initialized it. Now we have to close it. So we'll do browser.end. And again, we can asynchronousness, you can handle using await. And as await is used inside a function, we can call this function as an async function. Simple. Now with this before and after, can we run the test? Let's see if we run what happens. For that, I'll go to this command prompt and let's run this command called npx nightwatch. Under the test folder, we have ecommerce.test.js. So I'm just running this one selectively, correct? Now, once I enter, it's going to run. This is starting Nightwatch test suite, which is inside this before. Then it's trying to do the init. It's saying there's no URL defined for .init command is fine. And then there is nothing actually to run because we have not defined any test so far. So it's saying after that closing Nightwatch, this is coming from here. Okay. So it means my before and after is getting called even though I don't have any test. So let's proceed with our test and other configuration. The next one that I want to write something that executes before each of the test cases. You know before each, right? So runs before each test cases. Here we will do before each, and this takes a function again, and here let's put a console.log and let's say navigating to home page, and we have initialized the browser already using before, so use browser.url. Here we will be providing the URL to the e-commerce playground. This is the URL. Once browser gets this URL, it will take some time for the page to render, right? Now for that purpose, we will use a method called waitForElementVisible. This is the method waitForElementVisible. Which element we are waiting for to get visible? Let's say body. And for that, we will give some time that how long we are going to wait. Around 5 seconds, right? We are waiting for the body to appear. So before every test I run, I want to make sure that my browser gets this URL and then the page gets loaded. I wait for about 5 seconds to make sure that the body of that particular page is visible so that I can start writing my test cases. Okay, and my test cases will also run. So at this stage, can I run this? Let's do it again. So whenever I run, it opens the browser for a flash and it goes off. It only because it has nothing to run after this. Okay, so it goes off. But I don't see any error as well. And it's connected to the Chrome driver on this port. That means it's using the Chrome on Mac, my Mac. I can see all these things. So things are fine so far. Now, as we have defined before each, the one more thing that I'm going to define is after each. And that runs after each test case. So here we'll be doing after each. It takes a function, and here we can do cleanup, logging, etc. I think some cleanup we have done with after closing the browser. So for after each, let us do a simple logging for now. Console.log, say test completed. Okay, so you'll see this after every test getting executed. Fantastic. Now we are going to write our first test. First test. To write the test, we'll use what? It. What it takes? First, the test case name. So the test case, first test case, let's take like should. By the way, whenever you write test case, make sure that you start with should. It's a good practice because unless that test case run and gives you a result, you don't know, right, what is going to happen, right? Sometimes it matches the expected result, so it pass. Sometimes it doesn't matches the expected result, so it's fail, and you have to fix something. So should is the right way to make sense for each of the test cases. So first test case is should display the home page title. This is my test case, and I have to now code to get the test case running. So if I go to the playground once more, it has got a title called your store. You see over here, it has got a title, right? So what I'm going to test now, after the browser loads this page, whether this page has this title your store or not. Okay, so this is the test case we are writing. So here, what we will do now, we will do browser dot assert. We have learned about assert. We have learned about expect. So in Nightwatch.js, we won't be using expect. We'll be using assert. Expect also helps in making assertion. Here we'll be using assert directly. So browser.assert. And on top of assert, you have plenty of methods. Now all these assert methods, writing custom asserts will come into the future session. Here we are just giving you the step-by-step approach of getting ready for writing a test. What are the different components that you need for writing the test? But inside the test, there are a lot of other nitty-gritties. For example, when you're asserting, there are different ways that you can assert. For example, text content, whether certain things contain certain text or not. Title contains, whether title contains certain text or not. So there are plenty of things, right? Element visible. A lot of things are there that we'll be learning in the future session. But for now, let's assert for this particular test case, assert for title contains, and the titles that we want to assert for is called your store. This is our first test case, correct? Can we run this? Let's go over there. Let's run this. Let's run this test case. Oops, I made a spelling mistake here. So function, yeah. Now it should be good. Okay, starting the app. Let's see the output over here. Element body was visible after 16 milliseconds. Then testing if the page title contains your store test completed, it passed. Now let's change your store to your store 1 and then run the test once more. Now we will see one of the assertion getting failed. So again, it's loading this URL. Element body was visible Okay, now you see this test will fail. Okay, see here, testing if the page title contains your store 1, taken 5000 milliseconds, which is like 5 seconds. Expected contains your store 1 but got your store. So it's not matching. Expected and the actual is not matching. That's the reason you're getting this error. Okay, fair enough. When I'm running this test, there is a browser also coming up. Let me bring that browser to this window so that you can also see it. Okay, let's run the test again. Now the browser will come up. Here you go. Here is the playground coming up, and the test will continue and it will go off trying to run the test. Yeah, and we still have the error, right? So to fix this error, I know what we need to do. Just make it like your store. Okay, so this test case is done. Now let's go for our second test case. Our second test case will be searching for a product on this e-commerce site. Now e-commerce page is loaded. We can search for iPhone. First, the test case we are interested in running now should search for iPhone and show results. And over here, we'll be writing the things. So first thing is browser. Everything that you want to write, it will be on top of browser. Now, on browser, you have variety of methods. So one of the thing is called setValue. So what does it mean? It means that you can set value on a particular element on your page. Now if I go to the playground once more, I have this text box. If I inspect this text box with right click inspect, this text box is nothing but this input type text, this guy, right? So if somehow with the CSS selector or anyways, I can locate this input box, I can use the method to locate this input box and set any string over here such that if I set iPhone as a string, the word iPhone will come over here. Okay, so that is my first strategy, is to set a value into this text box. Second strategy would be similarly locate this search button. I'll inspect this. I have this search button over here. Then simulate a command on top of this search button so that I can execute the search of iPhone over here with my automation, right? So that's the goal I have. Let's get back to the code. Now, how can I select that input type text whose name is search? We can use something called CSS selectors. Again, in the future sessions, when you're talking about assertions, we'll also talk about locators in details. There I'll be teaching you how to locate different element on your page using different methodology. One of the methodology is using CSS selector. So if you have to select an input type on your page whose name is search, you will do it like this: input type whose name is search. Okay, and then close this guy. All right, what value will set with? The value that we are interested to search is called iPhone, isn't it? So we'll set with iPhone. All right, so far so good. After setting the value, the next thing that we are interested in is to simulate a click on the search button. So we'll do a dot click, and again here we can pass a selector to select that search button. The search button having a class called search hyphen button dot. So we can do dot search hyphen button. So you have simulated a click on this particular search button. If I go to the playground once more to show you, see here, this particular div is having a class called search hyphen button. So I can simulate a click on this div itself. Okay, if not in the button, I can also do dot search hyphen button space button so that I can get the click handler on the button itself directly. Okay, what I mean by that, space button. So it means that find an element which is having a class called search button. Inside that there is a button element. Register a click on that. Then once the click happens, what exactly happened? Let me manually click on it. It is going to take some time and list out all the iPhone over here. You're seeing this iPhone over here. Now if I right click and inspect again, you see that each of the product is inside a div which has a class called product-thumb. So it means now I can now go for this particular element to first appear on this web page. So wait for element visible. Which element? An element which is having this particular class. Okay, so let's go to my code, call wait for element to be visible. Which element? An element that has this class, which is that div, and then wait for certain duration. And once this waiting is done, then I'm going to see whether this element has a text called iPhone or not. Okay, that is my assertion. So if you see, each of this guy is having this text iPhone. You're able to see this iPhone. If I scroll also iPhone, right? So next thing that I can do, now my assertion start dot assert dot, we're looking for whether it contains this text called iPhone or not. Contains is the method. I have to pass the selector. This is the same selector. I want to understand whether it contains the iPhone text or not. Now, if this happens, that means this test scenario of searching for iPhone and show results is done. Correct now? What I'm doing, I'm setting the value into the text box, then simulating a click on the search button, then waiting for all the product to get loaded, and then I'm going into find an element which is having a class called product-thumb, because each of the product having this product-thumb, and then we are seeing the text is there inside that called iPhone or not. With that I am asserting. Now if you look closely, each of these methods are chained. It means that first I'm setting value, then I'm clicking on it, then this waiting is happening, then this assert is happening. Everything is like chained. Okay, I am not doing browser.setValue, browser.click, browser.wait, browser.this, right? Everything is chained and sequential. Now let's run this. Let's see if this runs at all. I'll clear this. We should see the browser also coming again. Run this guy. Okay, it's getting loaded. So first the page will be loaded. Now we'll see iPhone over here. Yeah, there's all the product done. Okay, display the product for some time, very fast. But you see this past 3 assertions. Now here you can see past 3 assertions, loaded this particular URL, element body was visible, element product term was visible, then testing if element product term contains the text iPhone, test completed, all tests are passed, and finally it's closing the Nightwatch also. Awesome, great. Let's go back. If you're interested, can we write our third test case also? Okay, so what is this test case is going to do? Very simple. We are going to locate this my account and we are going to simulate a click on top of this. The moment the click happened, you see this title will change. It's changed to account login. So you want to see whether the title changed to account login or not. That's the test case that you want to run. Now to do that, we have to first load the initial page. And if you remember with before each test case run, we are anyway loading the initial page. After initial page gets loaded, I have to locate this particular element. For that I can right click on it and do an inspect, and this is the one that I need to locate. This particular anchor is what I need to locate. Now there are multiple ways you can locate an element on web page. Okay, you can take help of browser itself. Nowadays even browser has the AI support where you can right click on it and you can say ask AI and just give a prompt saying that, hey, what will be the longest selector to select this element, or what will be the smallest selector to select this element. Is going to give you the exact selector. But that's not the only way. Without AI also you can locate different selectors on your web page. I'm going to show each of them in the future sessions where we're talking about the locators and the assertions. But for now, you can ask AI selecting this particular A tag, and you can tell that, hey, tell me the selector to reach this tag. Is going to analyze and is going to give you the selector that you can copy and you can reach to this particular element. Now once you reach to that element, what you can do is basically you can simulate a click. How can you do a click? Browser.click, you know already, right? We have the command where you can actually pass it a selector. We'll go to the code. So instead of writing the code, I'm just explaining it. Let's imagine this is the selector that you got from the AI. What it does, it actually starts from a div which is having an unique ID of this. Then it has a UL that got this particular class. Inside UL you have something called an li. Inside li you go to a sixth child. Inside that you find an anchor, and from there you go to the first child and figure out that is that particular link to go to the login page. And then wait for visible means for the page to render as usual like before, and at least find out the body has got loaded, and then you assert if the title contains account login or not. Very simple, right? Just like before, assert text contains, assert title contains. Here also you have done the same thing. Here I have showed you one way of knowing or locating a particular element. There are multiple other ways also we'll learn in future. Okay, so now with this, let's run the test. Let's run it again. Yep. So here we see all this testing if the page title contains account login. Yes, we can see that, right? So let us see all the results from the beginning. First one, navigating to the home page, loaded the URL. Yes, body was visible and title content your store. That was our test case 1. Then we have again navigated to the home page, body was visible, product thumbnail after search, and it contains iPhone. Second test. Third test, again going to the same playground, body is visible, and then test if the page title contains account login. That also passed. So total, everything passed. Now we are going to open up this particular HTML page, which is under Nightwatch test output, Nightwatch HTML, and let's open this with preview. So if you remember, we have written 3 tests. So we have all three tests passed. And we can see all these details over here. The before, then should display homepage title, all passed. Should search iPhone and show results, everything passed. Should navigate to login, and then the after. So I hope it makes sense to you. You can find all this code on the GitHub, and the link to that is there in the description of this video. Please check it out. Everything is inside the ecommerce.test.js. And the syntax definition you can find inside def.test.js file, where I have posted all this explanation for each of the syntaxes. And we'll be using more and more of this in the coming session. So what is the coming session about? The upcoming session is about the browser automation. Using Nightwatch.js for browser automation, and in this session I'm going to show you how can you run Nightwatch.js on the Lambda test cloud environment. After that, we have other sessions lined up where I told that we'll be talking about assertions, locators, the asynchronous test, and more too. So thanks again. If you have any question or feedback, please write to support@lambdatest.com or go to www.lambdatest.com. If you want to learn more, follow us on lambdatest.com/blog. There are plenty of articles written on various things that you can do around testing, around Lambda test. Also, you can join our community.lambdatest.com, where you can post your questions and learn further. If you want to achieve Lambda test certifications recognized on your resumes, please go to lambdatest.com/certifications, get educated, get recognized. All right, stay well. We'll be coming back with the 4th session very soon.